So we should.
I'm going to do two things. I'm going to make you a co-host just in case.
Okay, great. Oh, I gotta pull up my.
And you might want to share screen anyway. And I also hit record.
All right.
We are recording.
So we're good. Okay. Really what I'm looking for tonight is any, if there is any, input on GCFB-R, that's recruiting and hiring of administrative staff. And then the evaluation procedure for hourly employees. And then remember, we're going to redact the form from policy when it goes to second reading. And then I understand Paul has some information on cell phone or electronic policies he wants to share.
And that'll work out great. So good. Do we want to look at each policy individually and discuss them, or do we want to see if anybody in the committee has had any referrals or comments or suggestions from the board or constituents?
I haven't. Nope.
Nope.
I
Nothing.
not received anything.
Nope.
Okay, excellent. So it sounds like we could just move forward and consider the policies reviewed. I would like to make one note, and that is, and John has already said it, that the evaluation form is separate from the policy. So the procedure is separate from the policy, and the board seemed to be receptive to that. Nobody had any comments on that. Everybody seemed to understand that is the general trend for policies and procedures.
So does that mean like we're going to take it out of policy?
Yes.
The form will be redacted from policy.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
It really shouldn't be in there.
Yep.
Excellent. Well, I guess if we're all set, wow, that was pretty good. We will just move forward and we will give Paul the floor.
Thanks, Jason. Now, I know that we've talked about cell phones and we want to revisit the subject at some time in some way. And I thought it might be useful just to get a few facts out there to see if it might help us kind of focus a bit. The thing which I've learned is there's not much data out there, to be honest, which is a reminder that we're still at the very early days of the internet and cell phones. We don't really know much about anything. People are still struggling to make sense of it all. But here's some statistics that might be of interest to you. First up, National Centre. I looked all over for statistics that might be of use to us, and in the end, there was a whole bunch of kind of opinions out there without much data. So I thought I'd just sort of focus in on credible sources. So National Centre for Education Statistics in the United States, for instance, 77% of schools prohibit the use of cell phones in non-academic circumstances during school hours. And I think this can range from complete prohibition to the kind of policy that we previously applied. So it covers a spectrum, but there's some degree of prohibition in 77% of schools. That's as of 2020. 91% of schools restrict use of, or access, I should say, to social networking sites from school computers. And the data sort of ended abruptly in 2016 because I think the computer ceased to be the main source for social networking data, but or information. So I'm not sure how helpful that is, but it gives you a sense as well of what schools do. I thought it might be useful to try and understand if there's been any change in cyberbullying. There's two sets of statistics that come out of the School Survey on Crime and Safety, SSOCS, and they're from 2010 and 2016, so it's a bit dated, I'm afraid. But
That's what
there's definitely an increase though in cyberbullying. The frequency of reported cyberbullying from some, I think it was 91 schools. No, maybe a bit more than that. No, it's more, sorry, I'm getting confused here. This is from a large sample of schools. I forget how many exactly, But on a daily basis, it went from 7.9% in 2010 to 2016, 12% were of principals reported cyberbullying. And then 14.9% presented described cyberbullying on a monthly basis, and 54% said they saw it occasionally. Only 19% never saw any. But the data is terrible, because it turns out that the schools that do not prohibit had lower levels of cyber bullying, and what it tells you is that some principals just don't even care. They're not collecting any data at all. So the data is just completely useless, in my opinion, except that it perhaps points to, amongst those principals that actually report cyberbullying, an increase over time. But I don't think there's anything much to say around it, because the ownership of cell phones has increased during that time. There's all kinds of variables, right?
Yeah.
California recently, with its state law AB 272, decided to prohibit the use of cell phones. But I think, once again, it allows you to implement this in any way of your choosing. Looking around the world, the London School of Economics did a study. They looked at 91 schools, and they found a better outcome in high stakes exams in those schools that prohibited completely the use of cell phones, and it was especially pronounced amongst disadvantaged and underachieving students. They were the ones that benefited most from the complete prohibition in those 91 schools in the United Kingdom. Once again, it's the United Kingdom. I don't know if there's anything you can really get from that. There's a couple of studies that show that students found even the presence of a phone, meaning without even it being in use, just it's lying there on a table, was a distraction. It shouldn't be much of a surprise to any of us, I suppose. Doesn't mean anything much, though.
It is something that one of our student representatives said about her own experience.
Yes, that's right. She did say that. Yeah.
Very telling to me. Yeah.
It's a sort of Pavlov's dog thing. I think I experience the same, when I see a cell phone, it's like, oh, wait a second, can I have a chess game or something? Anyway, so there's a few states, Wisconsin, Tennessee, and others have kind of tried to ban it. There's a few municipalities that have gone in for it completely, for bans. France has got a complete ban in elementary and middle schools. China, with a very great concern around myopia of all things, has decided that students should not have access to phones. And parts of Australia, for instance, are imposing complete bans. There's just nothing to go on, I'm afraid, that would give us any clues as to what we should be or shouldn't be doing. The data is just very, very thin on the ground. But it's clear that it's a subject that many people are wrestling with. And as I said, I don't think you can draw much of a conclusion from it, but I thought it'd be useful just to kind of get some data out there and see if we could find anything to hang our hat on. There's nothing, in my opinion.
All right. So thank you for that. And next Thursday at our workshop, after the budget discussion and presentation of how it all works, we're going to have a conversation as a board as to, do we want to go further in the exploration of smartphone use in our schools? And we're also going to decide if we want to go further in talking about start times. So if we go further in having a discussion of what to do about the smartphone issue, we'd be deciding like at another workshop, let's say in April, how we're going to have community conversations about it. Because I am going to emphasize that a lot, from my point of view, that if we're going to explore this, let's all of us explore this: students, parents, staff, school board, all of us, because it's a big thing. So, but we as a board are going to decide next Thursday night, do we want to go forward with exploring the whole issue?
Good.
I have a question, and it's this: how do we know how much of a problem that we're trying to solve?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't know the answer to that. I've heard one student say that it was a problem. I've had different conversations with principals who gave me varying answers with regard to how much of a problem it was in their buildings. I think it would be very interesting to do some work around what actually are we trying to solve? How much of a problem
The first question.
is this?
Well, but that's the point of an exploration, is we have to decide, is there a problem?
Right, exactly.
So
The other, I guess, thought that I have is whatever we do, and I think it's wonderful to have, I'd like to have conversations with staff, with community members, with the kids, with the administrators, and make sure that whatever we do, we end up getting it as right as we can.
I think it's appropriate.
Because, you know, ultimately the if we have a more restrictive policy, we end up with a more restrictive policy, the administrators are going to have to enforce that.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to decide, is the time and effort is going to take for them to enforce it worth what we get out of it? In other words, what kind of bang for the buck are we going to get?
Right. I mean, to be discussed further, it also turns out that if you do go for a complete ban and you fail to enforce it perfectly, you create a whole new set of problems associated with those students that are not participating, and this is actually one of the studies I saw. So it is a very complex issue. So definitely worth a discussion. But I agree: is there a problem? And if there is a problem, is there a solution?
I wish I had saved this article when I came across it, but I actually saw an article in the Daily Mail about protests, student protests that were happening in the UK over new policies, not to do with electronics, but to do with other things like bathrooms, etc. And so the administration said they were organizing these protests, like using TikTok or Snapchat or whatever it was, you know, on their phone. So the administration said, well, all right, we're just going to ban the kids from bringing in the phones. And they showed pictures of kids lined up for blocks trying to get into the school while the administrators were trying to check to see if they had a phone.
Yeah, and whereas in Australia, it's been quite well adopted, and the kids, they have these pouches. I forget what the name of them are, but they deposit it as they walk into the school. They have their own pouch, and they just put the phone in and so on. And so it's a cultural, it's contextually important, I think, how it's executed. I mean, the kids in Australia also wear uniforms to school, by the way, so you know, it's a different world, right?
yeah,
There are a couple things I want to say without issuing an opinion, because I have a very strong one. You know, I think it would be important to hone down our research to our local community, which is what a police chief friend of mine would say. And you can do that by accessing Maine newsstand database and collecting qualitative data using superintendent, principals, and student comments. And, you know, like you said, Paul, there's not a lot of data out there, but there are several newspaper articles. And you're right, they're usually around the 2010 mark. And the other thing that I think that we should look at is the ACLU lawsuits against school boards around restricting technology in the classroom or cell phones. So I think that's an important place to go. I do know that Maine ACLU or ACLU of Maine has worked on lawsuits against school boards regarding inappropriate searches. That seems to be the big one, you know, and I think that we would be wise to reconsider at least that portion on searches in our school policy. And we need to come up with something, I wouldn't say more restrictive, but a better protocol than just taking a cell phone and then the teacher goes through it and, you know, uncovering data. So there has been lawsuits over that. So that's all I'll say about that. I think that would be prudent to take a look at those kinds of things.
And there
All
have,
right. Yeah.
there have been some districts who have relatively recently changed their policies on cell phones too. Like I think Bedford did, you know, and banned them. So I know there has been some recent movement around that we could probably find.
The Maine Principals Association is also a great place to go and look at the policies. Take our policy and compare it with the ones that are published there. I think you'll be surprised with what you find.
Yeah.
Well, this is a sort of a precursor for the discussion at the board meeting, Lauren.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think,
Okay.
again, next Thursday night, we're going to make a decision. Do we explore it or not? And then when we explore it, all of these opinions and ideas and data and everything should be shared. Next Thursday is simply a decision to explore or not. I got to tell you that I'm not surprised, my interest is student engagement and mental health. And I'm now concerned, like my kids, they got phones when they were in middle school. And I said, you need to learn how to manage them. And I was comfortable with that. If my kids were in middle school or high school now, I would be deeply looking at whether or not I was going to take them at 10 o'clock at night or something. There's stuff going on now that I just don't think is good for mental health. But the key words there is, I don't think.
Yeah, well,
right? I don't know. I just don't think.
Lauren, I think you know more about this than I do, but there's a phenomenon called bidirectionality associated with cell phone use, where kids who have problems have problems on cell phones. And it may not be the phone that's the issue. It may be the kids just simply got a problem, right? I mean, I am not an expert, but this is one of the concepts that you seem to bump into pretty quickly when you do research into this particular subject. Once again, I think as a result of lack of data, it becomes a very sort of individualized kind of science, and bidirectionality is a manifestation of that, I think.
Yeah. Yep. I think in the decade ahead, both schools, well, parents and schools have a lot of deciding to do on this particular issue. We have other issues to address to help students do better, both emotionally and academically. But I think we're in the era now where both are going to have to do some soul searching. So that again is what we'll decide next Thursday night. Do we want to go forward in that exploration together?
Okay.
Sounds like Paul's on the right track though.
I don't know. I've just
Organizing
done some work,
information,
right?
Doing the research,
Yeah.
Seeing what's out there. It's good. So,
yeah, and if we decide to go forward, and if we have community meetings, I think that'll be, to me, equally as fascinating as the research is what students and parents think about it. The staff would need to weigh in on all this stuff, but students or parents will probably have the bigger questions and thoughts and ideas, but we'll see. We shall see.
So please check out Maine Newsstand Database. And if you don't know how to check that out, you can go to the Maine State Public Library, go to their website and set up an account and then access journal articles and then access the databases, and you go down and you can look for Maine Newsstand databases. I did not find a lot of journal articles on it, but there certainly was newspaper articles. And I would encourage people to go to the Maine Principals Association and look at their technology and cell phone policies. And again, I really want to emphasize the ACLU piece, because I think that we can strengthen our policies regarding cell phone use and confiscation to protect our teachers and our staff and our kids and parents and so forth.
Okay.
Okay. Gotcha. Helpful. Thanks.
Certainly. And if you need any help working through those databases, please reach out to me. I'm in them on a regular basis. So good.
Very good. Thanks.
Are there any other questions or comments?
No, I'm good.
What a great meeting, 20 minutes. Excellent.
Yeah.
Love it.
I think our
All
agenda
right.
was done in 2.5, but
Yeah, well.
it makes me think like, Jason, you want to work with John because I remember John produced for us before you guys came on a long list of the policies of the district, and some were adopted in 2011, when we formed together as a unit, as a district RSU. So you want to like sort of go through that and figure out what do we need to address every single month. Because there's probably a lot we need to address, but you'll still want to prioritize that and get through the things we need to get through.
So
And
the last thing I did was I looked at the required policies, and now what I'm doing is looking at policies that are, older policies. So like if they were adopted in 2010 or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that since forever, we should take a look at some of those.
and will there be
So I'd like to
policies
come
we're
up-
just going to shed?
There could be.
Yeah.
I have not, in my look through our policy manual, I have really not come across a policy yet that I would simply get rid of.
Okay.
I think they're all good sound policies. There might be some updates that we might want to look at, and some of them we might want to get, like what Jason was saying about the search and seizure policy. We might want to get an updated legal opinion on that, because I think that policy might be a bit dated. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot we can do. I will generate a list of policies that have an older date of adoption, and we should probably really start to take a look at those.
So I would like to come up with a procedure for that. So that way we're not, what's the terminology? I'll just say it. I don't want to be accused of cherry picking policies.
Right.
So if we start with the oldest first, it could be like a 1-minute discussion, or it could be several meetings.
Okay.
Okay, good. And thank you for
That's
that
good.
advice, Lauren, because I wasn't really sure how to proceed after this meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's important that you and John get together and figure out how you want to proceed and present that to us. We'll probably go along with you, right? But I think that it's now time to do exactly that.
Okay, maybe I can meet with you, John, at a subsequent date and, have a brief conversation on a procedure, or perhaps we already just established it.
Yeah, that'd be good. And, we can
Yeah.
always email back and forth too. That's fine.
Okay, all right.
Great.
So do you want to just do that? Start with the oldest first and then,
What I'll do, I'll have Kathy is very familiar with our policies because she keeps the policy manual up to date. So I'll have her to start to order the policies from the oldest date of adoption. And then we'll generate that list and see where we go from there, I guess.
all right, good. Yeah, that'll work. Sounds good.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good
Great.
night.
Thank you.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you.
See ya.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.